It is only one poll, but it is nonetheless a poll. It is a national poll. Is that Reform UK have overtaken Labour? Keir Starmer's having a shocker of a week. Let's talk to Rupert Lowe, who is the MP for Great Yarmouth for Reform UK. Rupert, this is only one poll, of course, but I'm sure you welcome it.
Peter, yeah, it's. I think that the force is with us, as they would say in Star Wars. Not that that's difficult. I think the Labour Party has done its best to upset the pensioners, the education industry, the farmers, the small businessmen. I mean, they're doing their best to upset everybody, and I think that's now coming through in the polls. And at the same time, the Tories have got their issues. I think they've now appointed Kemi. She started slightly falteringly, I think, at the dispatch box. I think she's a very nice, decent lady. But can she do what is necessary to sort the Tory party out? I think the first thing she's got to do is sort out head office, and then she's got to sort out, her MPs, some of whom I think would be better suited on the Lib Dem benches. So that's a big job to do, I think, before the Tory party really has a chance to redeem themselves. In the meantime, increasingly, I think people are concerned that we need a party that comes from outside the political establishment and, can actually not only talk sense, but also deliver some sense when we get into power, which I'm hoping we'll do in 29.
Well, Kemi Badenoch has made some interesting comments, certainly in the last little while. She says Western liberalism has been hacked by woke ideologies that seek to undermine traditional values. She told a US audience activists on the left were smuggling in policies such as net zero and general neutral toilets while allowing easy access for asylum seekers. She said she enjoyed being called a cultural warrior because her grandfather told her she was descended from warriors, and she also claimed that Sir Keir Starmer would have been branded racist for making fun of her time at McDonald's if he had been a Conservative leader. I mean, a lot of what she's saying there sounds very similar to what Reform might put forward. Is there really much of a difference between Kemi Badenoch's brand of conservatism and what Reform UK is doing?
I don't think that's the point, Peter. I think after 14 years of Tory government, they haven't delivered what they said they would deliver.
But she's the one who'll be against you in 2029, and that's when you're talking
I think she's sound on issues which involve sort of wokery and other things that we do align on, but I'm not sure she's necessarily sound or has a deep understanding of a lot of the issues that are plaguing Britain. Many of which involve sort of business issues, regulatory issues.
I mean, she was the business secretary. She ran a government department, and
that doesn't mean she's.
There are people.
Doesn't mean she's run it.
It doesn't mean it's. I get that it's not necessarily done well, but she has experience of government, and there are people in the Conservative Party and Labour who have experience of government, whereas in your party there isn't anybody who has experience of actual governing.
Well, I think logically, obviously, one needs to have some form of alignment of what I call the common sense people. We're often branded as being far right. And I think there are some Tories who have common sense. There are equally some Tories who, as I say, would be better suited to the Lib Dems. So I think somehow the sensible people have got to align. Now, ultimately, unless the Tory party can be sorted out and it can find peace in itself, then the only way of unifying the sensible, common sense people who have Britain at the top of their agenda is through the Reform Party. And I think increasingly the British people are seeing that. They're hearing the 5 MPs in Parliament. We are not part of that two-party system which has created such chaos for the country. We are, if you like, a fresh pair of eyes, a bit like a sort of a business a sort of reconstruction expert who goes in, looks at the business and actually deals with the issues that the previous management have failed to do. So I think they can see there are lots of things. There's a real malaise. We've got this web of local and national government which is crowding out the private sector. And it's not enabling people to live their lives the way they want to live them. And it's got to change, Peter, or Britain's going to be in deep trouble.
Speaking of asking the right questions, we had a caller earlier on, and I promised I would ask you this question, Rupert. He said that, as far as he knows, Reform UK does not have a security and defence spokesman of the five of you. Is that the case? And if so, why after 5 months?
Well, look, I mean, we are an opposition party, Peter, as you know. I always say we're far from the finished product. We, as you quite rightly say, we're a young party. We're rough around the edges, but I think we ultimately have written a document. We called it the Contract with the People. We did cover those issues in that document, but we're not a big party with a spokesperson on every single item. We've got 5 MPs who have experience, a very wide experience. I mean, Nigel knows a lot about the defence issues, as does Richard. I know less about those, but I know a lot about farming and about business. And I think, you know, as and when the British people decide it's our time to be elected, we will deliver a policy as we've set out. If you go online,
but wouldn't it make sense, Rupert, to appoint someone now? I mean, it's been you're a young party, rough around the edges. That's absolutely fine. But now
we're a young party and we don't have a lot of funds, and appointing people, you know, often costs a lot of money. We have our views on defence.
But I mean, you have 5 individual MPs here paid for by the taxpayer. I mean, surely one of you could just take the mantle, could you not?
Well, I actually give my salary back to my constituency. So I'm paid by the taxpayer, but I'm acting as a conduit to my constituency. So that's not quite accurate in my case. But
okay.
Yes, but we, you know, our offices are funded to look after our constituencies. They're not funded to fund our political party. And there's a big difference there. And the Parliamentary Commissioner on Standards is extremely tight on these things. And as a young aspirant party, we have to be extremely careful we don't slip onto the wrong side of what is, I think, a very lazily constructed rule book, which is designed to trip people up. So, yeah, I take your point. We've covered defence in our contract with the people. We think there should be an increase of a percentage of GDP, but the concern we have is that this latest budget is going to damage the private sector GDP. I don't think people have any idea of the damage that Rachel Reeves's budget is going to do to the British economy, which the private sector now only accounts for 54% of the economy. The state accounts for 46%, which is far too high. And if you tax that increasingly shrinking private sector into submission, then you don't have the wealth to fund public services, which by their very definition, Peter, are a cost, not a benefit. They're not generating wealth.
And on the matter of reforming public services, that's something that Keir Starmer wants to do. He had something of a reset this week, whether he'd like to call it that or not, after 5 months in power. I just want to play a short clip of Keir Starmer's speech yesterday. This was at Pinewood Studios, talking about all sorts of things, including his missions. He had 6 milestones, 5 missions, 3 foundations, 7 pillars for growth. Let's hear a little bit about what he had to say.
How do we project our values, fight for our values, show our strength in an ever more volatile world? But also to show to the British people that their country can still do great things. And to be honest, not just great things, things that they should be able to take for granted, the basic functions of the state.
Were you inspired by this speech, Rupert?
Well, I think I was encouraged that he's finally realised that, for instance, things like the planning system is completely dysfunctional, and it's all very well for him to stand up on a platform and speak. I think, you know, my favourite expression is watch what the hands are doing, not what the mouth is saying. I think we've all got rather used to listening to what these people's mouths say, but they have absolutely no idea how to deliver it. And just taking planning as an example, the planning system is completely broken. And it's all very well for him to say he's going to build 1.5 million or whatever number of houses he's intending to build. He will not do that unless the planning system is completely ripped apart and reformed. It is not fit for purpose. He's finally realised that great crested newts, bats and various other sort of ecological issues seem to be far more important to the planning authorities than actually building houses. As you know, my view on that is that if we sorted the immigration problem out, Peter, we wouldn't need as many houses. So the fact that the immigration situation is completely out of control is what drives the housing requirement, but they're not going to be able to fulfill that. So I'm glad the pennies finally dropped. But as you know, of the 26 front bench ministers, only 3 of them have got a sort of vague modicum of business experience. And I would question that. So I think the reality is, if you run businesses, you know exactly how difficult it is to get anything done with the public sector. A lot of them work from home. Their pensions are higher than the private sector. I mean, they're basically indolent and dysfunctional. And until somebody actually gets to grips with that, nothing's going to change. And actually what's going to happen is that the private sector will gradually be strangled. Our best people are already leaving. I think there are 2,500 people queuing to get into Monaco. Goodness knows how many are trying to get into Dubai, Greece, Italy, and other places that have realized that, you know, there are some fantastic British people, but if you treat them badly and tax them into oblivion and waste their money on ridiculous schemes, policies, and general sort of what I would describe pipe dreams, they don't stay here, and tax them into oblivion at the same time. So I think it's encouraging that he's finally realizing and impugning the public sector. It's a shame that they've paid 15% pay increase to the train drivers, half of which is responsible for this, what Rachel Reeves talks incessantly about, this £22 billion black hole, which seems to be the answer to every question
it should be pointed out, because I always get texts about this, that those are the ASLEF train drivers rather than every single train driver. Although
we could have automated the trains by now, Peter, if it wasn't for the unions. The trains were one thing that could have been automated.
A point that is a very good point that has been made to me before. I want to talk about another leader who's having trouble, the leader of the Church of England, Justin Welby, speaking in the House of Lords. He made a bizarre comment that wasn't even slightly funny, tried to make a joke. Let's just play this clip.
The reality is that there comes a time, if you are technically leading a particular institution or area of responsibility, where the shame of what has gone wrong, whether one is personally responsible or not, must require a head to roll. And there is only, in this case, one head that rolls well enough. I hope not literally. One of my predecessors in 1371, Simon of Sudbury, had his head cut off, and it was then the peasants, the revolting peasants at the time, played football with it at the Tower of London. I don't know who won, but it certainly wasn't Simon of Sudbury.
Very misjudged. Rupert, what do you make of this?
Well, I think he's missed the sort of message, really, Peter. It didn't sound to me as if there was any contrition at all. I'm not a fan of Justin Welby. I think he is the epitome of everything that's wrong with the British establishment. I'm glad to see he was wearing his red and white Lord's lanyard with his Lord's pass on it. But no, I think, I don't know where the truth lies with what's happened in the past, but he's been there a long time. People have lost confidence in him, and the best thing he could have done was make a dignified speech, stepping down, bowing out, and doing it in a sensible way. And I don't think what he did there it didn't look to me like he was contrite at all.
Rupert, thank you for your thoughts. Rupert Lowe there, MP for Great Yarmouth.